you've gone ahead, you found a cartoon character. Relatively simplistic, like we said, right? Relatively simplistic. I've got Goofy going on. And what we're going to do is this. We're going to do something very similar to what we just did for our quiz, where you had to think about taking that movie poster and minimalizing it, right? Getting it as simplistic as possible. So I'll show you kind of an example here. So this would be what character, of course? Oh, absolutely, right? Now, there's a very, very little detail here, right? The background's just this solid kind of color. Everything's very, very chip-choppy, right? And yet, you clearly see the character in this very minimalist level, right? So we're going to take this same idea and we're going to kind of expand on it just a little bit. But to do that, we need to start comprehending layers. Now, we already know layers from Photoshop, so it's going to be very, very similar with a couple key changes. So to do that, we look over on your right-hand side of your screen, and it's probably already there, but if for some reason it's not, you would go to Window, and you click on the word Layers. It may already be there, but either way, if you go onto Window and Layers, it'll just magically pop on out for you, and it'll just be there ready to go. And you'll notice that we've got ourselves one layer, just called Layer 1, no surprise. So this Layer 1 has my Goofy picture on it, and just like Illustrator, if I click the little eyeball, it goes invisible, right? Easy enough. And a little bit different than Illustrator, what's nice is I can also lock layers. So right next to that little eyeball, that kind of blank space, if I click in there, you'll see a little tiny lock icon appear. And if you do that, you'll notice that you can't do anything anymore. Goofy's now locked in place, right? So go ahead if you haven't already and lock your Layer 1 for me if you would. Once you've done that, then if you notice down at the bottom of your layers menu, I apologize for you guys who can't see there, down at the bottom of your layers menu, just like in Photoshop, there's a little tiny piece of paper with like a flippy dip corner. That's our Make a New Layer button. So go ahead and create a new layer, and it should just automatically appear. Now you'll have Layer 1 and Layer 2. Easy, right? Cool? Good. Now let's get a little tricksy here for a second. I want you to put your mouse over top of Layer 2, click, hold, and drag down. And you'll notice that it just kind of flips right underneath so that Layer 2 is now underneath Layer 1. So click, hold, drag underneath. Now you got Layer 2 on the bottom. Solid? Again, if I'm going too fast or anything, you stop me. So what that basically means is this. I've got my cartoon character of Goofy, and he's, again, just like Photoshop, kind of on a pane of glass floating above my Layer 2. So what I'm going to do is this. I want to stick with minimalism. It's kind of our theme for today. So I'm going to look at Goofy, and I'm going to think about like what his main color is, right? So I could pick like kind of this peachish of like his weird nose. I could pick like this lime green of his hat. I'm gonna go with the skin here, that solid kind of color, that really jet black there. I think that's like, that is Goofy. So I'm gonna pick that color, and what I'm gonna do is this. I want to make a square just from my shape tools, right? I want to make a square that is the entire page of paper that I have here, my entire canvas, that is that particular color. So a couple ways we can do that, but the easiest, of course, is to use our eyedropper tool. It's in our toolbar down there. Works exactly the same as our Photoshop tool. I click on him, I can grab that exact precise color. Once I have that exact precise color, I'm going to use my square tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag out a big old square. Boom. Okay. So it is not necessarily like Adobe Illustrator's color black. It is this actual like Goof Troop color black. That's what I wanted, right? Now, depending on your picture, maybe your picture is a PNG, so the background's transparent, and your cartoon character is already starting to kind of subside into the background. That's what we want. Or, unlike mine, or excuse me, like mine's a JPEG, and you can tell it's got that white border around it. We're going to get rid of that in a couple seconds. So go ahead and lock your Layer 2. We're now done with Layer 2. Okay. Click once on Layer 1 just to activate it, and then create a new layer, so that now you have a Layer 3 on top of Layers 1 and 2. Okay. So in essence, your stack should be 3, 1, 2. That was kind of our rows there. So like I said, layers work exactly the same as they do in Photoshop. As far as I can move them around and I can adjust them, and we can do different layer adjustments and all these kind of things that we've learned with Photoshop. Now what we want to do is this. We're going to use our pen tool. So go ahead and grab your pen tool. And find something on your character that is easily identifiable. For me, I'm going to do Goofy's eyes. That's what I'm going to zoom in on here. Now I'm going to zoom in. You don't have to. I want you guys to see exactly what I'm doing. And if you need to zoom in, if you want to, we do have a magnifying glass tool. just like it was over in Photoshop. So here's the big key, and again, this is where we were working on our quiz a second ago. The hardest part of Adobe Illustrator is, especially coming from Photoshop, is giving up the idea of a paintbrush, right? In Photoshop, I just kind of scribble with my mouse and color magically appears, and I can clean it up later, right? But remember that Adobe Illustrator is shape-based, right? Think about like if you had a stack of construction paper, you were cutting out little hunks of paper like a magical collage that never ended. Doesn't matter how many shapes I stick on there, right? This white outline could be one big shape, that would work. Or I could do a couple different chunks of shapes, that would work fine too. As long as they're the same color, no one will ever know, right? No one will ever know. What's important is, as we're going along and we're looking at this, especially with me having zoomed in here, don't see it as Goofy's eyeball, right? Instead, see it as literally a single big white shape, right? There's another one. A shape of color, right? Here's another one, right? And I can keep going down the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pen tool, and I'm going to use this, my Alt-Option key. Remember that allows me to make those little bend, right angle bends in my Bezier curves, right? So I'm just going to go ahead real quick, and I'm going to show you kind of as I go along here. So I've got the color black selected right now. That's probably a poor choice, but it'll be just fine. Coming downtown. Use my Bezier curve right there to get that nice 90-degree angle. Same thing, Bezier curve. And let's line it up. Then he kind of comes right about here. You'll notice there's one big problem with what we're doing is eventually you start covering over the stuff that you are trying to outline. If that happens, don't sweat it. We'll give you a solution for that in a second. So I've got that. I'm just going to go ahead and double-click my color picker, change that to the color white, and there you go. Now, to you and us, it looks exactly the same, but remember that that's my own shape. I just made that, just by outlining, right? And the great part is this, because it's on a separate layer, just like with Adobe Photoshop, at any time once I go along, I can always come over here to my Layers tool. I can hit that eyeball to make the Goofy layer, in this case, invisible, and I can see my goof right there, right? So I can go along and outline anything that is white, and then maybe I'll go along and outline anything that is kind of this tannish color in his mouth. And then I'll outline anything that's this lime green color, and you get the idea. I'm not worried about outlines in this case, because my outlines are black, and his skin is kind of this dark charcoal-y black color, so it doesn't really matter. It's all going to blend together just fine. So all I'm going to do is basically go along. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to go along and start to outline all of these little goofy shapes, right? Kind of a reddish, a peach, whites, orange, and green, right? And I'm going to ignore everything else. I'm going to ignore everything else. And what we'll end up with is basically the essence of this character completely kind of minimalized down into basic colors, right? So don't sweat outlines. Don't worry about outlines. Only get chunks of color, right? No outlines, chunks of color. Cool? Cool? Give it a try. We don't have a crazy amount of time left. We're going to start next class with this project. Give you a little bit of time to finish it up, and then we're going to totally start something brand new, where we go take this same idea of kind of chunks, shaped chunks, if you want to think about it that way. We're going to use these kind of chunky shapes, only we're going to use way more of them, and we're going to start making things that are extremely complicated looking. But I promise you, as a graphic designer, it's going to be super easy, as long as you understand it's shapes. So you're not scribbling, you're cutting these shapes out with the pen tool. Okay? Give it a try. I'm going to come around and help you guys out here in a second, and then we'll call it a day.